All right, we want to welcome everybody here to the Alzheimer's disease webinar. To get started, we have a couple experts here with us. We have Kate Ruker, Lauren Cawley, and Jennifer Ayala, and they'll be helping share a little bit of information on this disease, and I will be moderating for us today. Just a quick overview. We're going to talk a little bit about the details of Alzheimer's disease. And then we'll get to hear an interview from our expert, Jennifer Ayala, on more specifically dementia. And then we're going to have a quick question and answer session. So you guys there in the audience can have an opportunity to talk to the experts. And then to finish up, we're going to do a quiz and just cover a little bit of the knowledge that you've learned through this webinar. In some of our polling, we found that there's not really a consensus, or not everybody's really informed on some of the details about Alzheimer's, especially the average age or which sex experiences Alzheimer's more frequently. So I'm going to turn the time over to Kate and Lauren and give them an opportunity to teach us a little bit more about Alzheimer's.
Great, thank you, Seth. So overall, Alzheimer's disease is a neurodegenerative disease that over time causes the brain to atrophy and decrease in volume and for neurons to die. It is usually diagnosed in the 60s or in the 30s or 40s for people with a specific type of Alzheimer's called early onset Alzheimer's disease. It is the leading cause of dementia, and unfortunately there is no cure, but there is a lot of research being done to try to find treatments for this disease. So there's a lot of complicated physiology behind Alzheimer's disease, but what's really important to know, just an overview, is that Alzheimer's disease causes the brain to atrophy and neurons to die. So this illustration can show us alpha amyloid beta plaques and tau tangles. These plaques build up, they're built of proteins, and they can interrupt these electrical signals between neurons. And as we know, these electrical signals are important in all functions of the brain. And over time, this causes decay, damage, and eventually death of neurons. It also can cause inflammation and can cause blood vessels to rupture. So there is a common misconception that Alzheimer's and dementia are the same thing, when in fact dementia is a set of symptoms, things like memory impairment, impaired reasoning or thinking skills, while Alzheimer's is a specific disease. So all Alzheimer's cases have dementia as a primary symptom, but not all dementia is caused by Alzheimer's.
Thanks for that, Kate. So I'm just going to talk briefly about kind of the scope of Alzheimer's disease. It was recorded in 2020 that about 5.8 million Americans were living with AD. And if you look over to the right, you can kind of see a bar chart about the different percentages in the ethnic groups of those who are suffering from AD. And we've kind of expected that this number will triple. As of right now, our cases have been about 2/3 of them have belonged to women. However, our colleagues in the United Kingdom have suggested that sex and gender does not play a role in the diagnosis or progression of this disease. And originally, this was the 6th leading cause of death in the United States. However, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are now seeing it ranked at number 7.
Thank you for that, Lauren. So we're going to talk a little bit about the diagnosis and treatment of Alzheimer's. As we previously mentioned, there is no cure for Alzheimer's disease, but symptoms can be managed with long-term care. And in order to arrange this, an early diagnosis is key. So some tests a geriatrician or a neurologist might do to help diagnose Alzheimer's disease is mental status testing, neuropsychological testing, discussing any behavior or mood changes with family and friends, and then lab tests and imaging to provide a differential diagnosis and rule out other causes of dementia. Some early signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's to look out for are things like memory impairment, difficulty concentrating and planning, problems with daily tasks, confusion about place and time, language issues, poor judgment, social withdrawal, and changes in mood and behavior such as depression. So sometimes these get confused with normal signs of aging. Here we've created kind of a comparative list, but overall the symptoms of aging are typically temporary and people are able to retrace their steps, and they're just temporary lapses. Whereas with Alzheimer's disease, these changes in mood and behavior might be permanent, and these these impairments will get worse over time. Alzheimer's disease is typically grouped into 3 stages: early, middle, and late, and this just describes the severity of the symptoms and the amount of care that will be needed for them. It progresses at a different rate for everyone, but the prognosis is typically 4 to 8 years. And unfortunately, Alzheimer's disease does have a 100% mortality rate, and can lead to deaths caused by things like choking, infections from a weakened immune system, accidents, things like that.
Yeah, so kind of like going over treatment and diagnosis, we have kind of put together an estimated amount that the financial burden for those with Alzheimer's disease and those caring for those is about 3 times higher than the average healthcare cost for other conditions among seniors. And we're kind of estimating by the year 2050 that cost will be around $1.1 trillion, and 70% of that financial burden will be borne onto the family to deal with. And some basic responsibilities that as caregivers we will be working with includes ADLs, activities of daily life like meal prepping, dressing, bathing, all that kind of stuff, basic housekeeping, running errands, scheduling appointments, planning activities for the individual. The possibilities are endless. Now, while caring for someone with Alzheimer's, it is very important to know not only how to best take care of them, but also how to take care of yourself, which we'll talk a little bit about in a minute. But the 2 biggest things that we want to emphasize with working with the individual is to keep up a routine and to have constant communication with them. This kind of eases them and any anxiety they have, and kind of keeps a routine, which helps them somewhat remember what they're going through. And just kind of like, they are human, so let them have active roles in their life still and help plan activities and stuff like that. Now, as for yourself, you need to make yourself a priority too. If you get into a situation you're not sure of, don't be afraid to ask for help. We ask for help all the time as colleagues, and keep a healthy diet and exercise routine. And we also highly recommend keeping a life outside of the job, so hanging out with your friends and family and keeping up with hobbies as well. And this is just an amazing resource we found, Alzheimer's Association. It kind of tells you what to expect, free educational resources, support lines, how to access your local chapter, just a bunch of variety of different helpful resources that we highly recommend that you take a look after this conference.
All right, thank you, Kate and Lauren. We'd like to do a little segment where I get to interview our expert, Jennifer Ayala, and I have a couple questions prepared for her. So Jennifer, what are some of the causes of dementia that can be prevented or addressed to make sure people, or help people prevent the onset of dementia?
Yes, so some of the causes of dementia that can be preventable are depression, emotional disorders, metabolic disorders, eye and ear impairment, tumors, infections, alcohol, drugs, and medications. And the ones that are not preventable are dementia of Alzheimer's and dementia of Parkinson's.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a couple of different factors that can be addressed to help someone avoid coming to get dementia. And like, what are some steps people can take to actually prevent getting dementia?
Yes, one of the steps that we can make to prevent dementia are making sure that we have enough vitamins such as vitamins B and D, that we are eating right, we are having a good sleep, healthy diet, exercising, mental stimulation, and it's very important to have an active social life as well. And of course, stress management.
Okay, perfect. I'm wondering, and I'm sure people in the crowd are wondering too, like, what are some common factors that increase risk for dementia that we can identify in ourselves?
Yes, the most common are blood pressure, blood sugar, belly size, inflammation, stress, genetics as well, as a sedentary lifestyle, and cortisol.
Okay. Well, hey, that's good to know. I'll look out for those things, make sure I don't, or help prevent for myself and for others development of dementia. So we want to now, thank you for talking with us, Jennifer. We want to take a couple questions from the crowd. Looks like we have A question from Richard. He's asking, is Alzheimer's hereditary, and how can I know if I'm at risk?
That's a great question. So in some cases it is, in some cases it isn't. Unfortunately, it's hard to tell. But if you do have a family history of Alzheimer's, then you're about 50% risk. However, there is genetic testing, so you can see if you have the genes that predispose you to develop Alzheimer's.
Okay, good to know. It looks like we have a question from Amy asking, is there any way I can prepare myself and my family for a loved one who will likely develop Alzheimer's?
That's a great question. The financial and emotional burden on the patient and the family can be extremely difficult. I think just making sure you have a support system in place and making sure that you have care in place, self-care, as Lauren mentioned, and an early diagnosis are key.
Okay, good to know. All right, and we're gonna take one last question from Bob asking, what is being done by the government or private organizations to address the issue of Alzheimer's and dementia?
Yeah, you know, since Alzheimer's doesn't have a cure, it's kind of hard to be hopeful about these things. However, the CDC is creating a program that will help with early detection and diagnosis, as well as preventable measures for Alzheimer's. And there's also been a drug that's been released that's been very helpful at like targeting and removing amyloid plaques, which is one of the leading factors to Alzheimer's disease, as Kate has talked about.
Okay, perfect. Well, hopefully they come across some solutions for this devastating disease. To finish up, we want to do a little quiz, see what you guys retained from the webinar. The first question being, what is the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? With this, you might remember Alzheimer's is a specific disease, while dementia is a symptom of brain decline. Contributing to Alzheimer's and dementia are blank plaques and blank tangles, which are primary features of Alzheimer's disease. You might remember those being amyloid plaques and tau tangles, which are a crucial part to development of Alzheimer's. And what are 3 common symptoms of Alzheimer's? There are quite a few, but we put down memory loss, frequent disorientation, intense mood changes, etc. And finally, what are the 3 stages of Alzheimer's? It's important to remember that there's an early, a middle, and a late stages, each having a different part of the development of Alzheimer's. So with that, we want to thank you all for attending our webinar, and we look forward to seeing you all next year. In the meantime, make sure to implement what you've learned with any patients or caregivers in your specific fields. And so with that, take care, and we'll see you guys all later.